What did Palpatine do in his free time? Being the Emperor of the Galaxy is no simple task, but instead of being on the battlefield like Vader and his Inquisitors, Sidious would spend his time in other ways. When he was Chancellor, some of the things he enjoyed the most was to collect artwork, read poetry, and even view opera shows. Because he loved the show so much, he even owned his own private viewing chamber in the Opera House, as he would attend very frequently. However, when the Empire rose to power, Palpatine's activities began to change a little bit. Unlike before, he actually found being an Emperor extremely boring. He was hardly fighting as much as he would used to, so instead he started to spend a lot of time writing books. He would mainly write about his life story, how he rose to power, and also about hidden dark side secrets. Aside from this though, he'd spend the rest of his free time finding ways to assure his own immortality, so one day he could somehow return. How was Palpatine able to defeat 3 Jedi Masters so easily? One scene that's criticized a lot is how Palpatine was able to defeat 3 highly trained Jedi Masters so quickly. While many believe it's just bad writing, there's actually a deeper meaning behind this. After the Jedi confronted Palpatine, Palpatine used a rare Force ability called Force Scream. Force Scream was one of the more powerful dark side abilities, and this is why he was able to break past them so easily. This ability affected both their focus and their strength in the Force, and this is what caused them to just stand still. Because they didn't know how to counter it, Palpatine was then able to defeat all 3 of them with ease. Why did Palpatine love his deformed face? Following his duel against Mace Windu, Palpatine's face was deformed by the lightning deflected from Windu's lightsaber. But did you know he actually loved this new appearance? Well, after noticing the damages on his face, he told himself that he'd actually missed the face of Palpatine. But for what his new goals were, the face of Sidious would work perfectly for him. He didn't see this new appearance in a negative way, but instead he believed that this was a gift from the dark side itself. Using his new face to his advantage, Sidious would then tell the public that it was the Jedi who were to blame for this. Why did Palpatine love Anakin's mechanical arm? After getting his arm sliced off in episode 2, Anakin was forced to wear a brand new mechanical arm, but did you know that Palpatine actually loved it? Well, in a conversation with Count Dooku, Palpatine shared his true thoughts. In his eyes, he thought that Anakin's mechanical arm was what made him perfect, as it was a symbol for all the sacrifices that he made over the years. Although he had to wear it out in public for the rest of his life, Palpatine saw it as a badge of honor, and he believed that it really proved both his courage and his skills as a warrior. He then told Dooku that Anakin was perfect just the way he was. What did Palpatine think would have happened if Yoda fought Darth Vader on Mustafar? Although it was Obi-Wan Kenobi who was sent to fight up against Anakin Skywalker on Mustafar, have you ever wondered what would have happened if Yoda won instead? Well, Palpatine shared his exact thoughts on this and who he thought would have won. After the Empire rose to power, Vader asked Sidious if their faces were now the faces of victory. Sidious, who was filled with anger just from hearing this, responded by telling Vader that this wasn't a victory and that he was lucky that he fought up against Obi-Wan instead of Yoda. Sidious believed that unlike Obi-Wan, Yoda would have finished the job and wouldn't have allowed him to live. This would have then led to not only the death of Darth Vader, but it would have also ruined their grand plan. Who was Palpatine's secret lover? Although Palpatine was known for asserting dominance throughout the Empire, did you know he actually asserted dominance in another area? Well, after the Empire rose to power, there were many rumors and speculations that Palpatine used to do it with his own aide, Sly Moore. Moore was one of the only few people who knew Palpatine was secretly a Sith Lord, and crazy enough, she was even Force sensitive. Many believe that they had a secret love affair, and newspapers even called her Queen of the Empire. With that said, there's a high chance that Sly Moore could in fact be the grandmother to Rey. What was the only regret that Palpatine had about Order 66? Although we all know that Palpatine's plan for Order 66 ended up being successful, did you know he actually had one regret? Well, minutes after giving the order, he started to sense that all the Jedi were dying one by one. This made Palpatine smile, as he started to feel the dark side only growing stronger. But there was one issue. Despite being thrilled about this, Palpatine regretted that he wasn't there in person to watch each and every one of them die. He ultimately believed that this would have been the best kind of revenge for their betrayal. Why did Palpatine hate using his lightsabers? Although Darth Sidious was known as an elite duelist, his lightsabers were actually something that he hated. Sidious believed that lightsabers were an outdated weapon, and the Sith had already outgrown the need for them. Instead, he considered them to be a weapon of the Jedi, and felt that his true weapon was the dark side of the Force. Because of this, Sidious rarely used his 2 lightsabers and focused more on using his dark side abilities. However, during his time as Chancellor, if there was a time where he did need to use his lightsabers, he would keep one of them hidden within a statue in his office. This of course was kept a secret to hide his true identity from both the Jedi and the Republic. How did Palpatine almost kill Darth Vader? After finding Darth Vader on Mustafar, Palpatine was disappointed that he lost to Obi-Wan Kenobi. However, he was even more upset at the fact that Vader was no longer the apprentice that he imagined he would be. Instead of the athletic Anakin Skywalker, he was now an overcooked piece of hamburger meat. Because of this, Palpatine had thoughts on whether to kill him or to just leave him there to die as a form of punishment. After much thought though, he then realized that he spent over a decade trying to manipulate Anakin, so to kill him would just be a waste. Who did the Jedi think the Sith Lord was? Although the Jedi spent many years trying to figure out who the Sith Lord was, did you know they actually had some ideas of who it could have been? Well, after a lot of spying, the Jedi were convinced that it was somebody in Palpatine's inner circle. They believed that it could have either been one of the Red Guards or maybe even Palpatine's assistant, Masameda. Since they had no real proof, they never decided to act on this, but crazy enough, the last person they expected was Palpatine himself. Instead, the Jedi believed that Palpatine was being influenced by the Sith Lord and they were actually worried for his safety. Why didn't Palpatine hunt down Yoda after Order 66? After the events of Order 66, every surviving Jedi was to be hunted down by the Inquisitors or by Darth Vader himself. However, one Jedi who was never discovered was no other than Yoda, and thankfully there's actually a reason for this in canon. After the Empire rose to power, Sidious began to reflect on his duel with Yoda. He laughed at the fact that Yoda fled their duel to hide, and in his eyes, he believed he beat the former Grand Master. However, after never finding his body, Sidious believed there was a chance he was still alive, so he sent a group of Inquisitors to raid his hiding place. Unfortunately for Sidious though, the Inquisitors were never able to find him. Because of this, he then made the choice to never pursue Yoda again, as he believed he caused no real threat. Instead, Sidious preferred him to watch the Sith rule the galaxy, as this would then remind him of all his failures. What happened when Palpatine took a young Anakin Skywalker clubbing? After a long day of Jedi training, Palpatine approached the 12-year-old Anakin to take him on a small adventure. To do so, they traveled together to the lower levels of Coruscant, where Anakin would then see how life was outside of the Jedi Temple. Upon arriving, Palpatine took the young boy to a club, where he started to tell Anakin of all the scum and villainy that takes place around there. He then mentioned how this place was even filled with corrupt senators, and that they only really care about themselves. As they watched one of the senators gamble, Palpatine then wished that his chance cubes would turn against him so that he would lose all his money. Anakin, using the Force, turned the chance cubes against the senator, leading to him losing and the two of them giggling about what just happened. This moment would be one of the many seeds that Sidious planted towards manipulating his future apprentice. Why couldn't the Jedi sense that Palpatine was a Sith? One common question is why the Jedi were never able to discover Palpatine's true identity, despite being in the same room as him on multiple occasions. Well, there's actually two reasons for this. The first was that Palpatine was trained to use a Force ability called Buried Presence. Buried Presence was a stealth ability that allowed him to cover his Force identity to anybody that was near him. Palpatine would train himself to be portrayed as a normal human, appearing as just a politician, not a Sith Lord. But this wasn't the only thing. The second reason was that the Jedi were not familiar with the Sith. They thought the Sith had been destroyed for thousands of years, which led them to ban any teachings of what to expect from a dark side user. So when the time came, they weren't sure for what signs to look for, allowing Palpatine's hiding to be that much easier. How did Palpatine actually kill Darth Plagueis? Although we've all heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, the details on how Palpatine killed his master are a lot more darker than you may think. The night before Palpatine was elected Chancellor, Palpatine and Plagueis decided to celebrate their upcoming victory. To do so, they spent the night at Plagueis' penthouse on Coruscant, where they drank multiple bottles of wine throughout their evening. However, Plagueis got so intoxicated from all the drinking that he passed out on his bed. Because of this, Palpatine saw this as a chance to strike, so he used Force Lightning to torture his master. As he was suffocating him, he mocked Plagueis for being so blind and laughed at the fact that this really was a tragedy for somebody that was so wise. After enough time, however, the Force Lightning eventually killed Plagueis, leading to Sidious to eventually rule the galaxy. How did Palpatine troll Yoda? Although we all know that both Palpatine and Yoda dueled in Revenge of the Sith, did you know that their conversation here was way longer than what we only saw in the film? Well, shortly after Yoda entered Palpatine's office, Palpatine decided to do a little bit of trolling. As the two spoke, he looked at Yoda and welcomed him into his office, but he also wished him a happy Empire Day. In response to this, Yoda told him that he won't be finding this day happy, nor will Darth Vader because Obi-Wan was on his way to go fight him. However, Palpatine laughed at this and reminded him that he should have never sent Obi-Wan after him because Vader gets such a thrill from killing his friends. Safe to say, however, that these words didn't age well.